People are dumb. They've put money into 401ks and IRAs thinking that that will become something. It doesn't. They ironically put their money in savings. They're scared to be a product of the product. Realtors often do this. It's like, dude, if you sell real estate, you should own real estate. By the way, if you are an investor of real estate, guess what kind of clients you'll attract?
One of the things that's interesting in terms of for real estate agents specifically, and we've been realizing this recently, it's almost like a real estate agent is the kind of person that will go out, work hard as hell to plant seeds, to plant someone else's orchard so that they can reap the benefits of it.
We were just talking with Pace Morby about this.
Yeah. And it hits hard when you think about it because there's no, you're learning all the skills. You're learning how to communicate with people. You're learning how to hunt the opportunities because the opportunities is what's important, not the money. How does somebody get out of that addiction of making money in that aspect, being attached to the outcomes and being an investor?
Yeah, I think you have to start by actually starting to look at both the long game. I think that some of the most financially successful people are playing along in a short game. And I got all the love in the world for Pace, and Pace plays along in a short game. He's got a great strategy on this. You know, my wholesaling company allows me to do all of these deals, making 20 grand, 50 grand, 80 grand, 200 grand on just flipping paper. And what that does is that's the short game, right? That's just pulling in just, you know, truckloads of money very easily with systems. But on the other hand, buy and hold game is how you make sure that when you're playing the short game, the last thing you want to do is wake up in a decade and be like, I got nothing to show.
Yeah.
I got nothing to show. You know, you buy one home. Like, so for example, I won't touch a deal unless I'm making 25% a year ROI on it. And I usually do 30 to 40. So you take that 25%. And if you just buy one home, drop 50 grand down on a single home, 20 years from now, that's going to compound into $4.3 million. You hit my average ROIs, one home turns into $17.3 million in 20 years. So you plant a seed, you wake up in 20 years, it was totally passive. It took like none of your time and it got $17 million, right? Everyone should play the long game smart enough to think that way, but we don't. People are dumb. They've put money into 401ks and IRAs thinking that that will become something. It doesn't. They ironically put their money in savings. They're scared to be a product of the product. Realtors often do this. It's like, dude, if you sell real estate, you should own real estate. By the way, if you are an investor of real estate, guess what kind of clients you'll attract? Not someone looking for a primary one time in your life transaction. You're going to find entrepreneurs and you're going to find investors. And you know what investors do? They are like, in my whole game, when I owned my own realty company, we wouldn't work with anyone unless they were an investor. Right. Unless they were going to buy multiple homes so I can build the relationship once and I can keep harvesting and growing business. But if you don't turn around and take your heavy winnings and prop it into becoming a product of the product, people don't get, like, you're kind of screwing yourself over. You're like 3 inches from gold. You're so close to such a big win. And yet, what are you doing? You're making all this dough. You're having fun living it up, and you're not actually becoming a product of the product. It's sad when I see it, because a lot of realtors, when I ask, like, who's a real estate investor? The realtors always raise their hand. I'm like, sorry, let me ask again. Raise your hand if you own property that isn't your own home. Right. And the hands don't go up. And I'm like, okay, got it. Being a realtor is not an investor. I know that you deal with investors. You're not an investor. Please do not confuse yourself, but become one, like 100%. And if you're that close to the gold and you're not participating, it's strange.
Yeah. No, you said it perfect.
It's so funny because so many people get their license and then they don't have any sales skills, right? So that they can't really produce at a high level. So they have to go out separate from the real estate course and teach themselves the business, the sales skills, how to do more transactions. Now you have to go out and teach yourself the investor skills to actually do something with the money that you're making. It's tough. I think the biggest thing is there's a huge difference between consuming big and thinking big. And so many realtors, I'm guilty of it myself. You know, you make all this money and then you put it into dumb shit, watches and cars and stuff that's flashy and stuff that's not making you any money. And like you said, you wake up in 10 years and you look back and you say, holy shit, I have nothing to show for it.
Yep.
So I think what we're realizing is, you know, proximity to people who are doing this at a high level is super, super important. Tell us a little bit more about your wholesaling business and what you guys are doing.
I want to kind of like zoom out for just a second because I was way too dumb to become a doctor. Like, I just didn't get chemistry and biology, but statistics was my game. Like, I really love math. And when I took statistics as a weeder class, I was in a class with 200 other kids and they graded the curve on me. And first time in my life, I never did my homework. I just get math. I love stats. And so when I had these 3 mentors and I started asking them, like, well, what should I do in real estate? They'd be like, oh, you should flip this deal. And then you should wholesale this deal. And then you should, do some some apartment complexes and then you should buy this commercial thing. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like all these strategies, I can't master any of them. I should master one. What's best? And they said, well, that's an unfair question. You can't actually answer the question of what is best unless we understand your bias. And I said, well, what do you mean bias? They said, well, what do you prefer? Like you might say, I like the strategy that makes the most money, but then inversely, it's the most risky. So you better be good with risk if you're comfortable with profits. So it's like, okay, I got you. So I came back to him a week later with an algorithm. And I said, okay, here's my analysis. Here are the 6 things I value. I want to select a strategy that takes the least time, the least effort, the least risk, makes the most money, works in up and down markets, and provides a service. So I said, those are my 6 criteria. And based on that, I put the top 30 strategies in, and 2 things popped out. For the long game, I started learning that if you do short-term, like 5-year holds on single-family homes in the top markets around the country, you can get those ROIs to perform long-term at the highest rate. And then I also learned that wholesaling, hands down, also met the 6 criteria for the other game, which is the pay me money now. So I've done thousands of flips and I've done thousands of holds, and I play these 2 strategies based on what will take the least time, effort, risk, make the most money, working up and down markets, and provide the most service. And so those are the 2 games that I play. I don't play any other games. And that's because I believe that the 3 most important letters are ROI. And that means that when I'm doing a buy and hold deal, people will get stuck on, oh, well, like, where's it located? Location. Or they're like, well, is this a lease option or a rental? And I'm like, you know what? None of that care. None of that matters. I'm like, well, what do you mean none of that matters? Like they get caught up in strategy. I said, there's something that trumps strategy, and it's ROI. And so the return on investment is what we should become obsessed with. If I look at one property, my ROI is 25%, and another property is 40%, which deal should I do? The higher
100%.
ROI. The higher ROI. So that's the way that I approach buy and hold. But wholesaling, I then have to turn around and value my time. So I've partnered up with Carlos Reyes. Carlos has a really great pace. Actually went through Carlos Reyes years ago in his game, like Ryan Panetta and a number of others. And Carlos has built a lot of automation and systems around wholesaling. So instead of dialing for dollars, he employs people out of country to dial for dollars for you and qualify deals. He uses a lot of data. He does a lot of paper traffic. You know, he's been a really excellent business partner for me. So my students, when they come and work with me, I basically say, hey, Carlos and I have a system for wholesaling. And it's really built around automation because the ROI is not on money, it's on time. And then when it's buy and hold and it's passive, then the ROI is actually on the performance of money. And so those are the 2 things that we gauge as investors of those 2 different quadrants.
Love that. One of my buddies, we were talking about getting out of the rat race of real estate. And he was telling me one thing that was interesting.
Real estate sales,
and the addiction of being an agent. And we were also reading a book by John Maxwell, and one of the things that was very interesting, or was like a light bulb that turned on, was the power of influence and leadership, right? And the only way to get out of the sales side of it is by delegating, right? Because you can't cut it off, because then you'll be broke, right? And you can't just replace it, because then you're gonna have to go through that learning curve again. So you need to learn how to delegate very, very well at a high level and find the right people for those seats. Now, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to comment. It reminds me about my buddy Jimmy Rex. You know, in Utah, Jimmy Rex was like rookie of the year all those years ago. Built this huge, team, and his advice was always go find a great mentor that's crushing it, that can teach you sales and all that. And this last year, he basically handed off his business to my other buddy Tyler Bennett, that's done a couple billion in real estate with me, and now he just runs masterminds. And for him, it's the game of leadership and influence, and that's how he exited the selling game of real estate.
That's the thing. It's like you learn all these psychology things to sell people, but then you realize that the influence part of it, of being able to lead people and get the right attractors, seeing what you've done is insane. You've built a massive channel, right? And massive platform. So you have an endless supply of people coming in, resumes coming in, and then you're able to create these machines by putting the right people in those right seats. So you're just basically a connector. Now, how did that get there?
When my YouTube channel took off, I had for years developed a partnering model that basically said, hey, I've got all this experience as an investor. I'm going to go find people with money. And if they'll bring the money and we'll form like a 50-50, LLC partnership together, I will do 100% of the work, and then we'll just split the profits. And people loved it. And I did that with thousands of people. When YouTube started taking off, my social media, right now it's like 5, 7, 10 million views collectively every week on all my channels. And it's a game of leadership and influence. And it's really kind of what's happening right here, right? And so people will basically, they'll find me, they'll decide if they like me or hate me. And if they like me, then they'll follow. If they follow, at some point, they're going to binge me. When they're done binging me, eventually they're going to get to a call to action that says, hey, did you know that you can partner with Kris Krohn? I heard about it. I'm going to click that link in bio. And so every day I have people that stream in saying, Kris, I want to partner with you. And what I do is we become 50-50 partners, and they put up the money from like a 401k or an IRA. I have a team of 200 experts that do all of the transacting, and all I do is put it together, and I spend less than an hour a month. I spend less than an hour a month managing any of the fulfillment of real estate. I spend 3 hours a week on Monday afternoon doing social media. So really the game of influence that you're talking about is 100% how I'm not actually in that game, but reaping all of the benefit of being in the game. I just had a partner reach out to me on 10 homes we bought. He's like, hey, Kris, I'd like to buy you out. He's writing me a check for $310,000. I've probably put maybe an hour into that deal. So you could say, okay, that hour was worth $310,000.